So that I can fit all of this in, you might make sure that it has this in my hour. You might want to watch, and then given how much time we have left in that hour, we can go back over it, and then you can follow along with me and record as much as I can. So in the very end, what we're going to do is they give us the tracing for us to, drawing for us to trace, and then we're going to create this pair. Hide this for a moment, and this is what we're going to start with. There's a series, in lesson 5, there's a series of little templates that we're supposed to trace using the pen tool, and I will show you how to do that. To use the pen tool, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the tear off tab, because you'll notice that there's variations of that tool. You wish to add anchor point, add an anchor point, subtract an anchor point, or convert to anchor point. We use these tools. But this is the pen tool. And the pen tool is used for drawing very precise shapes. And to draw very precise shapes, you typically use something called a template, and that's what these are. You'll look at the pair drawing when we're done, and they provide for us a little line drawing. And they obviously give us the little ball and stick here that shows us what we're supposed to call the tangent angles that I'll talk about in a bit. But, you know, it gives us a path that we're supposed to follow. And to do anything really accurately in Illustrator, you need some sort of drawing that you use underneath, and that becomes a template. To draw something really precise and accurately just out of thin air is really hard. So oftentimes you can either use a photograph, you can use a sketch that you've drawn on a napkin and scan that sketch in, and then import it and use it in the background on another day, next Tuesday probably. We will do that because I want to show everybody how to use the scanner. So we're going to start to work on, well, not quite yet. After when we're working on the beach scene, then I will show everybody how to use the scanner so that when we do the mask assignment, if you have a photograph of a mask or a drawing of a mask that you want to use as a template, then we'll show you how to approach that. So that's what these are over here. We'll hide that. And let's start with the simplest thing. So I'll start by selecting the pen tool. And my preference is that I don't like seeing the icon of the tool when I draw. I like seeing crosshairs instead. So if you hit the tab key, or rather the caps lock key, you see the little crosshairs instead of the pen. And so when I click where those lines cross, I know that's precisely where I'm going to establish an anchor point. There's another way to do that too. I can go to Illustrator, my preferences, and I can go to, let's see, I'm going to start by just going to Units and Display. See if it's here. No, it's not. Okay. Then I'm going to go ahead and click Next. Keep clicking Next until you know what? I'm thinking of Photoshop. You have to hit the caps lock too. There we go.
So in view, sorry, going down to the pen.
Yeah, if you hit the caps lock key, it toggles to a different way to view the tool. In Photoshop, you can actually go into preferences and change the way you see that. And I forget.
Oh wait, first you gotta select the pen tool.
And then when you want the tool back or a different version of the tool, just hit caps lock again and it moves up.
Turn from the top.
Okay, so to make a straight line, you need 2 points. You need a start point, you need an end point. And to do that with a pen tool, you click, and you move the mouse, so that wherever you click is the start point, and then wherever you end, click is the end point, and voila, you've made a line. It looks a little jaggy at the moment because it's not completed, but when it prints, it will be perfectly straight. Now when you're done, if you are done with this, you need to deselect it. And to deselect it, we go back to the selection tool and deselect. And then if I wish to make another straight line, then I select the tool again, and I click, and I move the mouse, and I click. Another way to do that, if you want to use key commands, use Command, click, and it will deselect that tool, that object. So without having to click off of the pen tool. But if you forget, and I often forget, when you go back and you do it the hard way, like I did, this is a right. So again, you click, you move the mouse, you click, and then okay, I'm done with that path. So now I hold down the Command key and I click off of it and it deselects it. And watch what happens when I don't do that. If I click and I move the mouse and I click, and I say, I'm done with the path. Now I'm ready to make another line. But I'm not, because if you look carefully, you'll see that the second anchor point is highlighted. It's darkened. The first one is an outline. When I go to the next, come down here, trying to make another line, and I click again, watch what happens. It thinks that I want to continue with this path. Anytime you have open paths like this, and you continue to click, it thinks you want to continue with that path. The only time it doesn't do that is when you go all the way around the beginning and you create something called a closed shape. And we'll do that in a little bit. Okay? So, if your goal is in here, simply to make a simple zigzag shape, a zigzag path. With the pen tool, you simply start, move the mouse where you want to start. You move to the next point where it changes direction. That's typically where anchor points are placed, where the path changes direction. Now that gets a little tricky when we start to get into curved paths. Right now we're just working with straight lines. I mean, you could have as many anchor points between point A and point B as you want. You really don't need it. It's really best and more efficient, and you'll get a better looking drawing in Illustrator if you use the least number of points necessary to do what you have to do. And you will only learn that through experience.
And why is that?
You'll get a smooth, most of the time you'll get a smoother curve or a straighter line. What you oftentimes you think is a straight line, one of those anchor points might be just out of alignment a little bit, or the same with a curved path, it'll be off a little, and you won't notice it on the screen, but when you print it, you'll see little blips. So the fewer the points, the smoother the curve, or the straighter the line. You only need two, it's basic geometry, you only need 2 points to define a line, so boom. Just use 2 points. So now I'm ready to move to the next point, which is where it changes direction, and I click. And because it's simple zigzag, straight lines, I simply move the mouse and I click. Move the mouse and click. Move the mouse and click. Move the mouse and a single click. And then again when I'm done, hold down the Command key and click. And I'm done 4. So I want to go back and finish it up again. You can always go back to the selection tool, click and deselect the path. So if you forget that Command key, deselect. But that requires a couple of extra clicks, so it means that it's less efficient. That's all. It's not right or wrong, it's less efficient.
Why is it that the lines I drew are not appearing on the screen? Why is it that the lines that I drew are not appearing on the screen?
Possibly because, let's look over here for a moment and check your fill and your strip. Are they both white or are they both none? Do you have a black fill and a white strip?
Yeah.
And that's why.
Oh, no. I have it exactly the
It's
same.
still selected. See, watch what happens. If I were to go back and select this, and now we're flip like so and deselect it and deselect it. Let me go back to view. Outline. Oh, see what happens. I'm going to show you. Let me click this and make a white stroke here. As well as a white line, and boom, it just sort of disappears. Is that sort of what it looks like?
No, it just it's in there, but like the lines are already from.
Okay, I'm going to hit Command Y. Okay, so something happened here. So let's go back. Let's click. There we go. And that looks right. So we'll deselect. And now you see it. Okay. I'm not sure what happened. If ever you make a shape or a stroke and you're done and you don't see it, the best thing to do is to toggle between view and outline in preview. And when you do that, you will see all the paths that you've created, even though it matches the background and becomes invisible. So that turns off all the color when you do see just the paths. Yes, Gloria?
What was the shortcut to end the path?
Hold down the Command key and then click off of it, and that will just end it. So when I go back and I hit Command Y, when I deselect, notice that I can't see the path. It's covering part of the other one up, but even if I move it off, and now I deselect, it becomes invisible, and I think I've lost it. It's all gone. You will discover from time to time, if you think you've lost things, or one shape is behind another, it's not gone. It's there. It's just that it's blending in. It's kind of like the snow, trying to draw a snowball. What's that one, a white cat in a snowstorm or something? It's just all white. So that's what we're doing here. But if I hit Command Y, notice that it shows it in outline form, and it is here. And then I can come back and I can change the properties of the stroke to black. And you don't see this in outline form, but when I hit Command Y again, it toggles the preview and it becomes visible. Does that make sense? Okay, so these are random zigzag lines. What if you want to control the direction of the line? What key do you think you would hold down to control the direction to absolute horizontal, vertical, or 45-degree angle? Shift, that's right. So just as you hold down the Shift key to constrain the shape when you're scaling it, or when you're making a simple shape like a rectangle or a circle, we can use with the pen tool. I can start by clicking on the first point, and then hold down the Shift key. Now look at it. My cursor is off. It's not on. It's slightly above where I want it to be. And watch what happens when I click. Notice it goes directly horizontal. And that's by holding down the Shift key. Watch again. I'll come down here and I'll move it just to the left a little bit. And you would think it would click right where my cursor is, but because I have the Shift key held down, it will constrain the direction of it to be perfectly vertical.
So the only thing you're manipulating there is the height?
Correct. So you continue to hold down the Shift key, move it in place, and it will be absolutely horizontal, absolutely vertical. Or in this case, in the last one, if I hold it down and I move here, it will move it at a 45-degree angle. So those are the three directions that will hold absolute if you hold down the Shift key. Once again, hold down the Command key, click off of it, and then done. And it's finished. It's an open path.
To get the crosshairs instead of the...
Hold down, click on caps lock. Caps lock. It's the key to the left in the middle of your key. It's in the middle row all the way to the left. It's just a preference that I have. I don't like looking at the little icon because oftentimes I can never tell exactly where I'm placing that anchor point. If I want to be precise about the placement, it's easier for me to use the crosshairs, just personal preference. Okay?
Question. Holding the shift key and going from one point to the next, instead of just going across, it
Well,
doubles.
you click first, then hold down the shift key, and then click again, watch how off I am. You can see how it goes absolutely horizontal.
Okay.
Try and do. Right? Sort of?
Yes, I was.
Okay. It's important to get good findings. Okay, doke. So now the next one, and this it gets harder now. Because now we want to create curved paths. We don't want simple straight lines. We want to create curved paths. And this now it gets harder because what we have to do is we have to pull out something called tangent handles. And tangent handles control the direction of the path, and they allow it to be curved as well as straight. So it would be best if you watched. I'm going to zoom in. And I'm going to start by making a simple curved arc. And this time I'm going to click on my starting point and I'm going to drag up to about here where it ends. Notice it pulled out these handles. This is not the path. This is an extension of the anchor point. Now I'm going to move over to the end and click. Notice how it starts to curve now. It's not straight. Now I'm going to pull down on the path and move the tangent handle at the same time as I pull, as I push. It will control the arc. And when I pull and I push until I move it around and nudge it and get it to match that underlying shape, then I can release. Now, anytime when I'm done, and this is true for the other straight lines as well, is that when I want to change the direction of the path, when I want to move an anchor point, I can always do that. None of this is chiseled in stone. None of this is fixed permanently. I can always go back to the direct selection tool. I can click on an anchor point, and notice that I can click on that and move it. I can also click on the tangent handle. Tangent handle initially functions like a teeter-totter. If I pull on one side, the other side goes up in the opposite direction. This part of the tangent handle controls this part of the path from this anchor point to about midway. This one controls a part of the path that is non-existent, and it also controls the direction. If I were to continue the path down here, the path would want to pull in this direction. Likewise, this path is pulling in this direction. Notice when I click and I drag on it, see how it pulls it in that direction? Likewise, if I pull on this one, it pulls it in that direction. If I pull down here, it's not going to do anything because there's nothing down here to pull, but as soon as I continue on the path, it will do it. Okay? So, to make a little scallop shape, this is like a sine wave. And notice the anchor, where the anchor points lie along, if this would normally be along the x-axis at 0. These are the points where the curve changes direction. So if you think about it, when you're drawing a path, especially from the template, so you can see the road ahead. It's like you're looking at a map. And if you can think of the anchor points, or where the anchor points need to be, is like an amber sign on the roadway that tells you there's a curved road ahead. That's what the amber signs tell you. They're squares that are turned on the side like a diamond shape. They'll tell you if there's a T ahead, a sharp curve ahead, slippery road ahead, whatever. They give you little warnings of what the road is ahead. Well, we know when we look at this little scallop shape that it's going to curve. And I don't know how much I need it to curve, but I know it's going to curve. So what I do is I click and I drag and I pull out the tangent handle, it really shouldn't be any farther than the length of the curve. You know, the height of the curve. Then I can go to my next point where it changes direction again. Here it would be equivalent to, you know, I'm using this, the car is an analogy, a metaphor, I suppose. And it would be like turning to the right, turning to the right, turning to the right, and I continue to turn. And when I get to this point, I need to turn the steering wheel in the other direction, don't I? So I begin to turn the car in the other direction. So I'll go ahead and I'll click, and I see that it starts to curve. I'm going to pull in that direction to finish the curve like so. And now I'm ready to continue again to the next point. So I click, and watch what happens when I pull in the wrong direction. If I pull down here, notice it pushes the path up. So if I'm pulling in the wrong direction, just then move it in the other direction. Notice how it pulls it in the opposite direction. Come to the next point, and I click, and I drag, and I pull down until it matches. And I click, and I drag, and I pull down until it matches. And I click, and I drag, and I pull down, and I can move the mouse in any direction. And unfortunately, it's something that you're going to have to do for a little bit and experience until you get the feel of how far to pull, when to push it over to the left or to the right, and nudge it a little bit until it fits the path underneath. And then when you're done, because this is an open path, again, hold down the Command key, click, and you fix it. And again, if you want to go back and change any part of this path, you can. And you do that by using the direct selection tool. I can move any of these anchor points. I can pull any of these tangent handles and create a mess when I'm done.
How is that? Just with the white selection tool?
Huh?
The white arrow?
Yeah, this is the direct selection tool. The direct selection tool allows you to select individual anchor points. The selection tool only allows you to select the entire path or object. Does that make sense? Ready for a variation on that? So we're stepping up the complexity of the use of the tool. Yes.
You sure again how to get the tangent handles off the this one?
If you use the direct selection tool, and if you've already pulled and clicked and dragged, these tangent handles will pop up anytime you select an anchor point.
No, I meant when you're first going to start your
Oh, you start with the pen tool, and you click and drag.
Oh.
Don't click, move the mouse, and click. You click and drag, and then release. And by clicking and dragging, you pull out the tangent handle.
When I do my second anchor point, the pen tends to want to go down instead of
Pull it in the other direction. Just move the mouse in the other direction now. The tangent handle tells you what direction the path wants to move. Because notice that this, for example, this tangent handle here, this part of here, here, controls this part of the path, from this anchor point to here. And it's pushing this direction, so it's telling me the path wants to go in that direction. If I pull on this, it's going to pull that path even further in that direction. If I push it back into a point, it gets closer and continues to pull it in that direction. Now watch, if I pull and I spin this around, notice how it pulls in the opposite direction? I know this gets very confusing.
So by having two tangent handles at the very beginning gives you a smoother line? Because if you didn't have it,
Right,
it
you
doesn't.
need a smooth line. In order to have a curved line, you need the tangent handles. You can always pull them out later. Watch. Watch if I do this. If I select this and I delete this. I can do it this way. And don't try to do it this way. Not that it requires a professional. It just might confuse you, that's all. Until you get acclimated. If I click here and I click here, it's a straight line. But I can use the convert direction tool, and I can click here, and I can pull out a tangent handle here, and I can click here, and I can pull out a tangent handle here. So you can always do it later, but it's easier if you do it from the start. Especially when you have a very complex compound curve, it will be easier if you get acclimated to the tool sooner rather than later to be able to use the keystrokes in order to manipulate the path rather than have to do it afterwards. With the tools.
I found this way easier. I said I found this way easier, the second way you just showed us.
Okay, but you know what? If that works for you and you want to do it that way, then by all means.
Pull your pin tool off.
That is a legitimate way to work. Some people do that.
Hit the pin tool, the little stop.
I guess, quote, the power users would suggest that you do it the other way.
I'll try it out. They use the farthest one over. I don't believe.
Power users are people who like to use
Does
keystrokes
it already have an anchor point?
to speed along, using the program. That's okay. Let me complete these, and then I'll stop the tape, and then we'll go over again. And you can quiz me on your.
Got to have two anchor points.
So now we step it up a little bit. It gets a little bit more complicated. This is similar to the other scallops, but notice that the abrupt change in direction there. The other one was more of a sine wave. These truly are scallop shapes. So the way I do this is a little bit different. You do need to watch up here and at the same time listen to the keystrokes that I review. I start off the same. I click and I drag and pull it up like so. And then I click and I drag until I get it the way I want it. But watch what happens if I click over here. Because what does this tangent handle tell me? That when I move from here to here, it's going to want to pull this part of the path in this direction, isn't it? So when I click over here and I drag and pull it, see how that's pulling in that direction? And I think, okay, then I'll just take from this and I'll pull it here. But then, because it functions like a teeter-totter, it messes that part up. So, okay, I gotta go back and redo it. An easier way to do it, I think, is, again, by using keystrokes. So before I move on to the next point, what I need to do is I hold down the Alt and Option key. And I move over the anchor point and I click. And by doing that, let me undo this a couple steps. I'm going to start over again because I'm messed up. Click again. So, and click here and pull down until I get it to match. Then what I'm going to do is hold down the Option key. And when I do, when I move over the anchor point, you see the little caret symbol? It's teeny tiny in the lower right-hand corner of the crosshair. It's like an upside-down V. It's a caret symbol. If I click on the anchor point now, when I hold down the Alt key, whoops, it gets rid of that tangent handle. Now when I go over here, and I click and I drag, oh, I know what I did. Never mind, I do it. No, let me start over again. I'm talking and I'm walking through them at the same time. Okay, never mind. Erase all of that, put it on, and let's start over again. Click and drag and pull it out. Click and drag and pull that out until it matches. I don't want to click this off yet. I'm going to do that down here. I want to change the direction of the path. Instead of it pulling down here, I want it to pull up here. So I held down the Option key, and I click on the tangent handle, and I drag it up in that direction. And now I can click here and drag, and notice it matches now. Again, this tangent handle is going to pull this part of the path down here. I'm thinking ahead. This is the road sign. It's telling me it's curving up here. I want it to go up there. So I hold down the Option key, I click on the tangent handle, and I drag the tangent handle in that direction. Then I can click over here. and drag until it matches. And if this doesn't quite match, don't fret it. You can always come back with a direct selection tool and manipulate it and refine it later. Once again, hold down the Option key, click and drag, and pull it up in this direction. Then move to the next point and click and drag until it matches. And the last time, hold down the Option key, Alt key, click and drag until it, and move it in that direction. Click and drag until it matches. Hold down the Command key and click to deselect. As I said, if I zoom in, you can see that some of it doesn't match real well. It looked like it did when I was zoomed out. I can always click on an anchor point, click on the tangent handle, and I can nudge it and manipulate it until it fits real nice. Click each of these, and again to fiddle with it until it matches a little bit more closely. Okay? So as long as the path is pointed in the right direction, you can always go back and tweak it later, as I'm doing now. Okay? One more before we do the pair. Okay, so this is a combination of going from curve to straight, from straight back to curve. And I'm also, notice that with the straight lines, you're perfectly horizontal, aren't you? So let's use the pen tool again. And because it's curved, what do I need to do? I need to click and I drag, and I pull out, and I click and I drag on the next point until it matches. Notice I didn't pull that out far enough. No big deal. Just leave it, and we'll tweak it later. Now I want to go not from a curve, but to a straight line. This is where I hold down the Option key and I click on the anchor point and it removes that tangent handle. Now I can hold down the Shift key to constrain the movement and click, and notice it goes over there perfectly. But now, notice it curves again, so what do I need to do? I need to pull out a tangent handle and pull it in the right direction, correct? So now I hold down the Option key, I move over the anchor point, and I click and I drag until I pull out the tangent handle. Now I can move to the next point, and I click and drag again until it matches. Now I'm going from a curve to a straight line again. I need to get rid of that tangent handle. So I hold down the Option key, I click on the anchor point, and it removes it. Now I can move to the next point. Hold down the Shift key to constrain the movement to horizontal. I need it to curve again, so I hold down the Option key, and I click and I drag on the anchor point to pull out the tangent handle. And I move to my last point, and I click and I drag until it matches. Now I can go back with the direct selection tool, and I can move anchor points. I can click on tangent handles, and I can tweak them until I refine it and I get it to fit just the way I want. Okay? Let me do the pair, and I'll turn off my video recorder, and then we can review these again. Okay? Am I going a little too fast?
Can you do that one again one more time?
Sure. Okay, select the pen tool. I start off just the way I did with the first scallop one. I click and I drag to pull out the tangent handle. I click and I drag until it matches path underneath. Now this needs to be tweaked a little bit. I can't affect this over here. Now I need to get rid of this tangent handle because if I go to here, see it wants to go down in that direction. So I hold down the Option key, I click over, move over to the anchor point, and it gets rid of that point. I want a perfectly horizontal line, so I hold down the Shift key, and I click to the next point. Now I'm going back to a curved line, I need a tangent handle, so I hold down the Option key, I click on the anchor point, and I pull out the tangent handle. Release the mouse and the Option key. Then I move to the next point and I click and I drag until it matches. And we're going to repeat that step again, or series of steps. I hold down the Option key, I click on the anchor point, that removes the tangent handle. Hold down the Shift key, move to the next point, and click. I need to pull out a tangent handle, so I hold down the Option key, move over the anchor point, I click and I drag to pull that anchor point out, release the mouse, release the Option key, click and drag and pull until it matches. And then if it doesn't quite match, it doesn't quite fit, at least they're going in the right direction, use the direct selection tool to first move the anchor point and get it where it needs to be. And then secondly, tweak the tangent handles and make them fit. Remember, you can also select an anchor point, and you can use your arrow keys to nudge it to the left or to the right.
Really?
Up or down. Okay, are you ready for the pair? And then I'll turn off the video. The pair has 4 parts to it. There's actually the pair itself, there's a stem, and there is a leaf. We're going to create it. Let me start with the stem. And the stem is already made for us. All we're doing is we're changing the properties of the anchor points. And as you can see, you can create a closed path using no more than 2 anchor points. See that we have this inverted teardrop shape here. If I click here with the direct selection tool, there's an anchor point, and there's another. That's it. There's 2 anchor points. Now, we're changing the properties of that shape just by using the Convert Anchor Point tool. So now I can click here, and instead of these being connected to one another, I can click here to disconnect them. Likewise, I can click on this one and pull it out. So now I actually pull out tangent handles, and lo and behold, you have it. Now be careful, because if I click this again, and I'm not careful, especially if I click on the anchor point, see how it goes back to a corner point? And click here, allows me to tweak. Okay, the leaf. They've already created part of the leaf for us, but we're going to do this again, and then we're going to go back. And they've already created the bottom half, and we're going to show you how to join them together. Especially if you start a path and stop it, how do you start it again? Because oftentimes the mistake that people make is that they make multiple pieces that they think are joined together, but they're not. So it looks like a closed path, it's not, but they're not. For example, if I click here, so, and I click here, so, and I deselect, and then I go to fill. Notice it only fills from here to here. Why isn't it filling the whole thing? Because these points are not joined. It's not a closed path. And this is a frequent mistake that people make. So I'm going to show you how to remedy that. Yeah, I'm going to come back to it because I want to make sure that you see the mistake that I made. start by correcting it, and then we'll come back. So you'll notice that this isn't as abrupt as the sine wave that we made, but it's similar. So if I start with the pen tool, and I click on a drag going in the direction of the path, and I click on a drag, again going in the direction of the path, and I'm looking at the underlying shape, and then I click and I drag until it matches the path underneath. Go down the command key, click, and then it's deselect. That's all there is to that. But what if I made that shape and I stopped as I have here and I want to continue to move on? I want to create the upper half of the leaf. If I click and I drag, and I move over here and I click and I drag, it looks like they're sort of connected, doesn't it? And I use the direct selection tool and I move over here like so. Everything looks like it's connected, doesn't it? Pretty close. And then when I switch the stroke, black stroke to fill, let me select this. Notice it doesn't fill the whole thing, does it? So they're not connected. When you see this happen, it means that those two halves are not connected. Because when you have an open path, as this is, and you use a fill, the fill goes from point A to point B. Similarly, you may have noticed, and you may not have noticed it when I used when I use the zigzag. Watch what happens when I click. Like so, and watch when I swap the stroke to the fill. It connects from here to here. So what it's doing is it's filling in the other way. However, if I move this about like so, notice how it changes the way it fills? Because it's connecting from here to here. Connecting from here to here. So how do I fix that here? Select the pen tool. Move over one of the endpoints, and when you do, notice the little forward slash. Does everybody see that under the cursor? That means when I click, it's going to reactivate that anchor point. So I can click and I can drag to pull out an anchor point or a tangent handle. Then when I move over the end point, you see the little circle in the lower right hand corner of the crosshairs? That indicates that now when I click, it's going to be a closed path. So now when I click on that, and I drag to pull out the tangent handle, what matches. Now when I switch to fill, notice the whole thing fills. So you have to look at those little visual cues in order to make sure that you start and stop where you had left off before. If you don't, there will be two separate paths, and they can be joined using a different way, but it's not as elegant, and it also takes less time to do it this way.
Can you do it again? Can you show it again?
So I created a path and I deselected, and now I decided I want to continue. Select the pen tool, move over the endpoint. When you are over the endpoint, you'll notice a little forward slash. That lets you know that you are over the anchor point, so that when you click, you've activated it, and now when I drag, I pull out the tangent handle. Now I'm ready to close the path, I'm ready to complete it, so I move over the end point, and when I move over it, notice a little circle in the lower right hand corner. That means now when I click, it closes the path. And now when I drag, it pulls out the other part of that tangent handle. One of the things that they have us do, which is sort of strange, They want us to make an arrow, and then they also introduce some filters in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pen tool, and I'm going to click from point A to point B. And just because I know this exercise, I want to make it a 3-point stroke. I don't remember whether the book tells us that or not. I don't believe it does, but it really should be a 3-point stroke. Now what I want to do is I want to bifurcate the path, meaning I want to cut it in half. How do I do that? What I do is I go down here and I use the scissors tool. I can move the scissors on the path and I can click. And when I do, notice that it broke that path in half now. So now when I click on here, that's separated and that's separated. So by using the scissors, that allows you to click on a path and actually cut it, open it up. Now I can go ahead, and now that I've divided these, and I know that both these paths are headed in the same direction because they started as a single path, I can add an arrowhead to this one, and I can add the feathers to the other. To do that, with this path selected, you can see that it's selected in red. I go to Filter, Stylize, and select Add Arrowheads. We actually have a tool, Add Arrowheads. Notice that we have start and end. How do I know which is the start and which is the end? I started down here, so when I cut it, it means that this is going to be the start and this is going to be the end. Wherever you start is your start point, wherever you end is the end point. It depends on what direction you were moving when you made it. So in the start, I do want none. For the end, let's use 2 of 27, and there are lots of these that you might want to come, scroll through. Look at all the different kinds of arrow tips, and tail feathers, and other little sticks and balls, and little squares, and little fingers that point, and all sorts of stuff. I want number 2 of 27. I click OK, and voila. It adds the arrowhead. Now I select the bottom half. Now I want to add the tail feathers. So I do the same thing with a filter, and I select Stylize, Add Arrowheads. Now I don't want anything on the end because this is the end. I want to put something at the start. So now I'm going to scroll backwards through here until I find the tail feathers. These are the ones that I want, 18 of 27, and voila, it adds the tail feather. Now, why would you want arrowheads and stuff? Anybody do any drafting? Anybody create any floor plans? Anybody build something in a wood shop or something like that? You have to make the plans, and you make diagrams that determine the length and the width and the height and the depth and all that sort of thing of your drawings. This would be for a technical drawing, like what a draftsman would use, a draftsperson.
The feathers are in the middle of the...
Okay, then you picked probably, when you should have picked end, it should have been start. So just undo that. So now when I deselect and I select one of these, I can move them independently by like so. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. So let's go ahead now and make the pair. And I'm just going to follow their little directions here. Go from A to B to C to D to E to F. And again, it's nothing more than a series of scallop shapes and compound curves. So if I start with the pen tool on A, because I know that this curves, I click and I drag and I pull out to here, and it tells me where to release the mouse. Then I click on point B, and I pull it to the next red dot. And I want to go down to 1.2. But notice that this changes direction slightly. So by holding down the Option key, I click on the tangent handle and I move it over to here, to the amber one. Whoops. Something up there. Oh. Let me go back again. Let me do that again. Click and I drag. Click and I drag. I pulled on the wrong tangent handle. Sorry. I want to click on this tangent handle. Hold down the Option key, click on it, and drag it over to this point.
Click the Option key.
Click on the tangent handle, move the tangent handle, release the mouse, and then release the Option key. Now I can click to the next point, and again, drag until it matches. Hold down the Option key, click and drag on the tangent handle, and move it over to the amber. Release the mouse, release the Option key, and then I can move on to the next point. So I click and I drag until I move it towards the red dot or until it matches. Hold down the Option or Alt key, click and drag on the tangent handle until it matches the little yellow dot. Release the mouse, release the Option key, now I can move on. I've done my scallop shapes for the bike. The rest is just clicking and dragging. It's a little wavy road. So now I click and I drag and 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 I click and I'm done. Now I can come back when I'm done and I can fill it. And if I want, I can also come back to the direct selection tool and I can refine my shapes. And I can pull and tweak the tangent handles until I'm just blue in the face. Sort of makes sense? Let me stop the video and then I'll repeat anything that you want me to repeat. And then if you like, you can go over them, we can go over them together from the very start. Angle with the bottom.